What if what you called a curse was actually God's favor in disguise? What if the unanswered prayer, the closed door, the sudden loss were not signs of rejection, but surgical acts of divine protection? You've been taught that blessing looks like overflow, ease, open doors, and applause. But that's not always how heaven defines it. Sometimes the greatest favor God can give is to say no. And right now, someone watching this feels conflicted. You love God, but your life doesn't look blessed. You see others rise while you're still stuck. You tithe, you serve, you pray, and yet you're waiting, struggling, wondering if you've been forgotten. But what if I told you, you're not lacking blessing, you're being prepared to carry it? Because true favor isn't measured by comfort, it's measured by capacity, and God will never give you a blessing that destroys you. So sometimes He'll hold it back until your heart can carry it without collapsing. This isn't just another message, it's heaven interrupting your confusion. The blessing you thought you missed was never denied. It was delayed because of love. What you called delay, heaven called protection. Today, you'll see what no one ever showed you. The kind of blessing that doesn't just change your situation, it changes you. What you called a curse was actually favor. You've been told that blessings are the evidence of God's approval, that if you're favored, everything should fall into place. But what if that belief has silently poisoned your faith? Because here's the truth. Some of the most blessed people in the Bible were broken, beaten, and buried, not applauded. Joseph was favored, but still betrayed. David was anointed, but still hunted. Mary was chosen, but still shamed. Blessing doesn't always feel like blessing. In fact, sometimes it hurts first. It dismantles your plans, disrupts your comfort, and delays your dreams. Not because God is cruel, but because He's crafting something eternal in you. You think you're being punished, but you're being positioned. Favor isn't a formula. It's not something you can manipulate by performance. It's a move of God's sovereign hand. And when He favors you, He'll protect you even from what you prayed for. Not because He's withholding good, but because He's preserving what's greater. Deuteronomy 28:2 says, "All these blessings will come on you and overtake you if you obey the Lord your God." That means you don't chase blessing. Blessing chases you when your steps are aligned. And maybe that's why you felt stuck. You've been chasing outcomes instead of alignment, seeking results instead of presence. You wanted the blessing without the blueprint. But today is the realignment, because what God is building in you is too holy to be rushed. The delay wasn't rejection, it was revelation. The silence wasn't distance, it was strategy. And the emptiness you feel, that's not absence, that's room being made for something sacred. Favor doesn't always feel like favor. You've prayed for God's goodness. You've asked for His favor. But what came next didn't look like open doors or answered prayers. It looked like delay, disappointment, even disaster. And quietly, your heart wondered. Did I do something wrong? But here's what no one told you. God's favor isn't always soft. Sometimes it comes wrapped in fire, forged in waiting, hidden in the wilderness. And if you don't understand this, you'll call divine preparation a personal failure. The modern church has conditioned us to equate favor with feelings, with increase, ease, and elevation. But if you asked Paul, he'd say favor looked like chains. If you ask Job, he'd say it felt like loss. And if you ask Jesus, he'd point to the cross. Luke 1:28 says the angel called Mary highly favored. Yet her favor led to scandal, fear, exile, and a sword piercing her own soul. So why do you assume your favor must look like comfort? Because here's the truth shock. Favor often puts you in uncomfortable places to fulfill uncomfortable assignments. You're not being punished. You're being trusted. That anxiety you feel isn't a sign of failure. It's the weight of glory pressing on your flesh. That rejection you faced wasn't abandonment. It was redirection. That season of silence wasn't a void. It was sacred insulation to keep your spirit untouched while heaven worked behind the scenes. God's favor doesn't always feel like favor, but it always forms you. And when He's done, you won't just have the blessing. You'll have the spiritual capacity to carry it with holiness. The enemy doesn't fear your blessing. He fears your alignment. The devil isn't intimidated by your blessings. He's seen riches come and go. He's watched empires rise and fall. What terrifies him is a believer who's aligned. Not loud, not popular, but rooted, unshakable. Because alignment with God turns ordinary obedience into supernatural authority. You've been praying for favor, but heaven has been calling for alignment. Because favor without alignment becomes idolatry. You start worshiping the gift instead of the giver, chasing outcomes instead of obedience. And before long, you're measuring God's faithfulness by how comfortable your life feels, not by how close your heart is to His will. That's where the enemy wants you. Blessed but blind, gifted but drifting, surrounded by open doors but disconnected from the voice that matters most. Psalm 1:1-3 says, "Blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season." Notice, the blessing isn't in the fruit. It's in the planting, in the placement, in the alignment. You've been chasing the next season, the next miracle, the next opportunity. But God is asking, can you stay planted even when nothing is blooming yet? Because it's not the fruit that scares hell. It's your roots. The enemy doesn't care if you're rich, famous, or applauded, as long as you're unanchored. But when you're aligned, you become dangerous. You start discerning faster, praying deeper, resisting stronger, loving purer, because now your blessing is backed by obedience. And when blessing meets alignment, it becomes anointing. God's goodness isn't always gentle, it's often guarded. You've asked God to be good to you, and He has, just not in the way you expected. Because goodness isn't always soft. Sometimes goodness withholds. Sometimes it disrupts. Sometimes it rips something from your hands before it destroys your soul. We've been conditioned to believe that a good God always gives what we want, when we want it. But that's not goodness. That's indulgence. And God is not a passive parent. He's a fierce guardian of your destiny. Psalm 84:11 says, "No good thing does He withhold from those who walk uprightly." But what if the thing He's withholding isn't actually good for you right now? Maybe the relationship you lost wasn't a punishment. It was protection. Maybe the opportunity that closed wasn't a setback. It was a shield. Maybe the silence you're resenting is the very silence keeping you safe from manipulation and misdirection. Because here's the truth most won't tell you. God's goodness is not always immediately understood. It's often only recognized in hindsight. The door you begged Him to open last year, you're now thanking Him for keeping shut. The plan you thought was perfect would have drained you dry. The spotlight you chased would have crushed you under its weight. God's goodness isn't always what you wanted, but it's always what your soul needed. And if you could see what He sees, you wouldn't be mad at what He withheld. You'd be on your knees in worship, praising Him for the no that saved your life. Because sometimes the most merciful thing God can do is interrupt your desire with His design. You've been blessed, but misdiagnosed. You've been waiting for a sign, a breakthrough, some kind of external shift that proves God is with you. But what if the shift already happened, inside of you? What if you've been walking in blessing all along, but because it didn't look how you imagined, you mislabeled it as lack? You're not cursed, you're not forsaken. You've just been misdiagnosed. By culture, by comparison, maybe even by your own church. Because when you measure God's favor by material success, you miss the deeper work. You overlook the grace to keep going, the strength to endure, the peace that doesn't make sense. You ignore the way your spirit stayed whole while everything around you shattered. That is blessing. Isaiah 43:2 says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." It doesn't say He'll remove the waters. It says He'll walk you through them. That means blessing is not the absence of the storm. It's the presence of God within it. So yes, you may still be in the waiting. You may still be praying for things that haven't come. But don't let the delay make you doubt what's already been deposited. You are walking in favor. But the world doesn't have the language for it. Because this kind of favor isn't flashy. It's forged. You weren't passed over. You were passed through. You weren't empty. You were being expanded. You weren't broken. You were being birthed into something holy. And when heaven diagnoses your life, it doesn't see failure. It sees faithfulness. The blessing was never the goal. It was the tool. You've spent years chasing blessings. Financial, relational, emotional. You fasted for them. Tithed for them, prayed late into the night for them. But somewhere along the way, the blessing became the destination and not the doorway. Because blessing was never supposed to be the point. It was supposed to be the proof. Not proof that you're better, not proof that God is impressed, but proof that heaven is near, and you're still part of the story. You weren't called to collect favor. You were called to carry it and release it. Abraham wasn't just blessed, he was blessed to be a blessing. Joseph wasn't elevated for comfort, he was elevated to preserve a nation. Esther didn't receive favor to sit quietly, she used it to save her people. So if your blessing ends with you, it's incomplete. God doesn't pour oil just to make you shine. He pours oil so you can burn, with purpose, with calling, with compassion. 2 Corinthians 9:8 says, "And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times you will abound in every good work." Notice that. Every good work, not every good feeling, which means the blessing on your life has an assignment. Maybe the reason you feel stagnant is because you've been sitting on something sacred. Favor is heavy when it's unused. Anointing grows cold when it's unpoured. And you were never meant to hoard what heaven handed you. The blessing was never just for your elevation, it was for someone else's deliverance. Until you give it away, it won't feel like favor. But the moment you release it, you'll realize it was never yours to keep. You don't need more favor, you need clearer vision. You've been praying, "God, bless me." But maybe the better prayer is, "God, show me what you've already placed in my hands," because the problem isn't always the absence of favor, it's the inability to recognize it. And spiritual blindness is one of the most effective weapons hell uses to keep you stuck in frustration while sitting in the middle of answered prayers. You're asking God for a breakthrough, but you haven't used the tools He already gave you. You're crying out for a new word, but you haven't obeyed the last one. You're reaching for blessings in the distance while standing on holy ground right now, but your eyes haven't adjusted to see it. This is why Paul prays in Ephesians 1-18. "I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened," because you can't walk in what you don't see. The enemy knows he can't steal God's favor from you, so he clouds your vision until you no longer believe you have it. And here's the shocker. Satan doesn't have to destroy your destiny. He just has to distract you from recognizing it. If he can keep you focused on what you lack, you'll never step fully into what you've already been given. So today, ask for clarity. Ask God to remove the film of fear, doubt, pride, comparison, whatever has blurred your perception, because your miracle may already be in motion. Your favor may already be unfolding, and your next step might not be getting something new, but seeing what's always been yours through heaven's eyes. The true test of favor is not in gain, but in stewardship. The world measures favor by what you accumulate. The kingdom measures it by what you can be trusted to carry. Because heaven doesn't bless you to impress others, it blesses you to entrust you. And trust is tested in obscurity, when no one's clapping, when no one's watching, when the blessing doesn't look like breakthrough, but like responsibility. You've been asking God for more, but God is asking, what have you done with what I've already given? Luke 16:10 declares, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. So maybe the next level isn't about increase. Maybe it's about integrity. Maybe favor doesn't feel like favor right now because it's wrapped in something heavy, a difficult job, a complicated calling, a burden that no one else seems to notice. But what if that hidden weight is where your next anointing is being forged? This is where many fall. They think blessing means ease, so when it gets hard, they think they've missed God. But the weight isn't the enemy. The weight is proof that heaven has found you worthy to carry something that matters. The real question isn't, are you favored? The real question is, can you be trusted? Because favor that outpaces character leads to collapse. But favor that rests on a surrendered life, that's where revival begins. You've been called to carry more than applause. You've been called to steward the sacred with clean hands and a burning heart, and when you prove faithful in the hidden place, God will make you fruitful in the visible one. Heaven's blessing doesn't always rescue. Sometimes it refines. You wanted God to take the pain away, to lift the burden, to stop the storm. But what if His greatest blessing was that He didn't? What if the fire you're in isn't meant to consume you, but to consecrate you? Because the highest form of favor isn't always deliverance. It's transformation. And God is far more interested in who you're becoming than how quickly you escape. That's why He doesn't always snatch you out. Sometimes He walks you through, shaping your soul in the process. Isaiah 48:10 says, I have refined you, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. That means there's a kind of blessing that comes inside the fire, not after it. It's in the affliction that your worship gets purer. It's in the waiting that your discernment sharpens. It's in the pressure that your calling gets clarified. And this is where many turn back, because they mistake discomfort for distance. They think God's silence means He's absent. But the refining isn't abandonment. It's approval. You're not being punished. You're being purified. He's burning away the pride, the fear, the idols you didn't know you had. And in the process, He's revealing a version of you that's not just blessed, but ready. So stop praying to be rescued and start asking to be refined. Because the ones who walk out of the fire don't just have a testimony. They carry an authority that can't be taught, only forged. And that is favor. You thought favor meant ease. You thought blessing meant applause. But today, heaven has interrupted your assumptions with a deeper truth. You were never unfavored. You were just misinformed. God didn't forget you. He was forming you. He wasn't holding out on you. He was holding you up. And every delay, every silence, every burden you couldn't explain was not a sign of rejection, but a signal of refinement. You've been walking in blessing, not the kind that fills your hands, but the kind that fortifies your spirit, cleanses your motives, and deepens your roots. So now the question is no longer, God, when will you bless me? But, God, how can I steward what you've already placed within me? Because when you shift your posture from chasing favor to carrying it, you become more than a recipient. You become a vessel. And vessels don't shine for themselves. They pour. They overflow. They release heaven into the earth. If this word pierced through your weariness and whispered light into your soul, comment below, God, I receive what you've already given. And if your spirit wants more of this kind of truth, subscribe. Not just to hear more content, but to keep receiving what heaven is still whispering. Because this isn't just a message. This was a visitation, and it was never about what you lacked. It was always about what God was revealing in you.